So without providing evidence, President Trump and his team continuing to make repeated claims of alleged voter fraud, while his legal team prepares to file more lawsuits this week. Paula Reed is at the White House.
I think the first lawsuit will be Pennsylvania. The second will either be Michigan or Georgia. And over the course of the week, we should get it all pulled together.
The president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, said his client will not accept a projected defeat.
At this point, it would be wrong for him to concede. There is strong evidence that this was an election that in at least 3 or 4 states and possibly 10, it was stolen.
But they have provided little to no evidence in a court of law to support their claims. In Michigan, Georgia, and Nevada, judges have rejected lawsuits backed by the campaign, saying they presented no serious evidence of widespread fraud. In Pennsylvania, the Trump campaign was able to get poll watchers a few feet closer to vote counting, but they continue to make allegations that there was not enough access. Republican Senator Mitt Romney criticized the campaign's baseless claims of fraud.
There's just no evidence of that at this stage.
CBS News has learned the campaign is keeping a list of GOP lawmakers who are not supporting the president. Some allies did offer support on Sunday.
At this point, we do not know who has prevailed in the election.
If I were President Trump, I would take all this to court. I'd fight back.
All the rhetoric is increasing tensions. 60 Minutes correspondent Bill Whitaker spoke with Republican Philadelphia City Commissioner Al Schmidt, who said his office, which runs the vote count, has received death threats.
At the end of the day, we are counting eligible votes cast by voters. The controversy surrounding it is something I don't understand. It's people making accusations that we wouldn't count those votes, or people are adding fraudulent votes, or just coming up with just all sorts of crazy stuff.
Accusations like you are cheating.
Yes.
You are manipulating the vote.
Yes. Or calls to our offices reminding us that this is what the Second Amendment is for. People like us.
You're getting calls like that?
Yes.
That's a not-so-veiled death threat.
Yes. For counting votes in a democracy.
Well, the Trump campaign dealing with something a little less serious. Staffers who have been tasked with answering the phone at their voter fraud hotline, they've been dealing with a lot of prank calls. But if you look at the margins in these key battleground states, they are just too wide to be overcome by a handful of court cases. But even if the president's attorneys, if they lose every single case, they have still succeeded in riling up the president's base with these unsubstantiated claims. Anne Marie.
So we're going to dig a little more into this. We want to bring in Rebecca Green. Rebecca, you're a professor of the practice of law and co-director of the Election Law Program, a joint project of the William and Mary Law School and the National Center for States Courts. All right. So over the last few days, actually even sort of before the election, we had heard all kinds of allegations from the Trump campaign. A lot of, not having access to the locations where the ballots are being counted, not being able to see what was going on, dead people voting, that's come up a lot, people voting twice, that's come up a lot. From what you have heard so far, what is the Trump team's legal argument? Do you understand it?
Well, I think it's on 2 different fronts. The first is relates to transparency. How close our observers stand. There have been some, allegations that observers have not been allowed in, and those have largely fell flat, except for the Pennsylvania case, where the Trump campaign was able to get a few feet closer to the counting tables. And then the other kind of category of cases are the fraud cases, the allegations of fraud, and there we've just seen no evidence yet of any provable facts related to fraud.
Mm-hmm. Even before this election had been called, the president had a press briefing where he talked about taking his complaints all the way to the Supreme Court. And this is after, in at least a few cases, local level courts had already either thrown their legal challenges out, or it had made it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court bounced it back to lower level courts. Is there a clear path to the Supreme Court for any of these legal challenges that you can see?
So in the normal course, in the recount process, the Supreme Court is not at all involved. It's a matter of state law. Of course, we saw in 2000 that there was a Supreme Court outcome. So it's not impossible, but that was a really, really rare event. You need a federal question to get into the Supreme Court, first of all, and second of all, you really need a very close election. So in the case of Bush versus Gore, it came down to 537 votes. And if we see a situation where the margin is that small and the number of contested ballots exceeds that margin, you can imagine that the parties will think of every way to challenge the count.
Mm-hmm. I want to revisit Bush v. Gore because I think as soon as people hear, recount, they have like nightmares of hanging chads and all that sort of stuff. But I want to ask you about something else that the president said. He had tweeted out and it said that he won this election if you just count the legal votes, not the illegal ones. What would make a ballot that was already cast illegal? Could there be such a thing as an illegal ballot that was counted?
Well, we don't know what he means by that because, again, he's presented no evidence yet to substantiate those claims. And remember, after he won the election in 2016, he alleged millions of illegal votes and established a commission to root them out. And of course, that commission disbanded without finding any evidence of a problem. So he doesn't have a good track record in terms of producing evidence of illegal votes. And certainly, in this environment, you can bet that election administrators are working through the counts very carefully and ensuring that every vote that's counted is, in fact, legal. Because I think they know someone is looking over their shoulder, and they know that this is, a fraud environment.
All right. Bush v. Gore. People are going to say, recount, oh my gosh, it reminds us it took 30-odd days before we could come to a conclusion. That election is completely different than what we're seeing here. Can you just remind everyone of what happened during the 2000 election, why there was a recount in Florida?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was exceedingly close. As I mentioned, it came down to 537 votes. So, that is, extraordinary in and of itself, and that the whole entire election came down to one state, and it was that close. The second feature of the Florida election was that it was really poorly managed. I mean, we saw the butterfly ballot, which just left a huge amount of uncertainty. We had really poor standards that were not uniform for how the recount would unfold. And of course, today we're in a very different situation. We're not dealing with butterfly ballots. We're dealing with states that have updated their recount rules since 2000 to make them much more clear and orderly. And it's just a totally different environment.
Yeah. Rebecca Green, thank you so much.
You're welcome.